September 28, 2009, Rochester, New York. A federal bankruptcy court received a Chapter 11 filing from a company called the Jolt Company, Inc. The company did not fail because Coca-Cola outsmarted it. It did not fail because Pepsi outspent it. It did not fail because the government banned it or because consumers stopped wanting what it sold. It failed because of cans. 90 million of them. Somewhere along the way, the founder of the Jolt Company, the man who built the brand from nothing, who fought the FDA, who outlasted every critic who ever called his product dangerous, signed a contract to purchase 90 million custom-designed cans from a manufacturer named Rexam. Resealable cans shaped like AA batteries, cobalt blue, with the Jolt logo printed on the side. 90 million of them. He did not tell his board of directors. He did not tell his investors. He signed the contract, the order went in, and when the invoice arrived, there was nothing left to pay it with. 24 years of business, gone. And here is what makes that collapse almost impossible to comprehend. By 1993, Jolt Cola had appeared in one of the highest-grossing films in American history, its cans stacked on the desk of a programmer in Jurassic Park, visual shorthand for a man running on caffeine and bad decisions. By the mid-1990s, it had become the unofficial fuel of Silicon Valley, the drink that programmers kept under their desks during the all-nighters that built the internet. A trade publication called Dr. Dobbs Journal named its most prestigious annual software award after Jolt Cola, the Jolt Award, given every year from 1991 onward to the best computer books and software in America, named after a soda. The energy drink industry, a global market now worth more than $50 billion, exists because Jolt Cola invented it. Red Bull, Monster, Rockstar, none of them existed before Jolt showed the world that Americans would pay a premium price for a beverage that did something to them. Jolt Cola built the road, then it died on it. But the real story of Jolt Cola is not the story of a bankruptcy filing in a Rochester courthouse. It is the story of a father and a son, a 6-year formula, and a decision made in 1979 at a soft drink distributor meeting that nobody remembers. A decision that changed what Americans drink, how they work, and how an entire generation of engineers and students and night shift workers powered through the hours that mattered. The story begins in Rochester, New York, 1979. Every week, we tell the stories behind the brands and the companies that shaped American life. Give the video a like and subscribe if you want to keep hearing them. Joseph Rapp had spent 40 years in the beverage business without ever owning a famous brand. He ran a Canada dry bottling plant in Rochester, New York, a working man's operation in a working man's city. Rochester in the post-war decades was the kind of place that made things. Kodak made film there. Xerox made copiers there. Joseph Rapp made ginger ale and tonic water, filled bottles, loaded trucks, and kept the roots running. 40 years. He knew the beverage industry from the inside out, not from a boardroom, but from a production floor. In 1979, he retired. That same year, he attended a soft drink distributor meeting, the kind of industry gathering where regional bottlers and sales reps talked market trends, compared margins, and argued about shelf placement. Joseph Rapp sat in that room and listened to what everyone else in the American beverage industry was planning to do next. Every single representative at that meeting was moving in the same direction. Less caffeine, less sugar, fewer calories, lighter taste. The future of American soda, according to every executive in that room, was subtraction. Tab had launched in 1963. Diet Pepsi followed in 1964. By the late 1970s, caffeine-free versions of every major cola were either on shelves or in development. The industry had decided, collectively and without dissent, that the American consumer wanted less of everything that made soda taste like soda. Joseph Rapp drove home from that meeting with one thought he could not shake. Nobody was going the other way. He called his son. Carl Joseph Rapp, known to everyone as CJ, was a sociology major at SUNY Potsdam, a small state university in upstate New York. He was not a chemist. He was not a food scientist. He was a college student who had watched his classmates, himself included, do something that no beverage company had ever thought to study closely. They mixed things into their sodas. Coffee was too bitter for long study sessions. Tea was too weak. There was no product on the market specifically designed to keep a person alert and functional through a 4-hour exam review or an all-night paper deadline. So students improvised, adding whatever they could find to whatever cola was cheapest, chasing a caffeine level that the commercial beverage industry had decided Americans did not want or need. C.J. Rapp looked at that behavior and saw a market. Not a niche, a market. He and his father began working on a formula in 1979. It took 6 years. They tested more than 100 different formulations, adjusting the caffeine concentration, the sugar content, the carbonation level, the flavor balance. The target was precise. They wanted to hit the maximum caffeine concentration the FDA permitted in a carbonated soft drink, 6 milligrams per fluid ounce, without crossing it. Every batch that came in above the limit went back to the drawing board. Every batch that came in below felt like leaving something on the table. The final formula settled at 5.9 milligrams of caffeine per fluid ounce, 1/10 of a milligram below the federal ceiling. A 12-ounce can contain 70 milligrams of caffeine, exactly double what Coca-Cola or Pepsi carried. The sugar content was 10 teaspoons per can, made with real cane sugar at a moment when Coca-Cola had just controversially switched its flagship product to high-fructose corn syrup. The carbonation was tighter than a standard cola, finer bubbles, cleaner finish, a texture that felt more like a classic soda parlor drink than anything currently on American shelves. In April 1986, the Jolt Company, Inc. released Jolt Cola in Rochester, New York. The slogan printed on every can, all the sugar and twice the caffeine. Not a tagline written by an ad agency, not a phrase focus grouped in a conference room. A literal, accurate description of exactly what was inside the can, stated plainly, without apology, at a time when every competitor was spending millions of dollars to convince Americans that their products contained as little as possible. The health establishment responded immediately. Michael Jacobson, director of the Center for Science in the Public Interest in Washington, called Jolt Cola reprehensible. State legislators in California and New York began discussing whether high-caffeine sodas should be restricted from sale to minors. Newspaper editorials warned parents. School administrators issued advisories. C.J. Rapp answered every criticism with the same argument. A 12-ounce can of Jolt contained less than 1/5 of the caffeine in a standard cup of coffee. Coffee was sold in every diner, every gas station, and every school cafeteria in America without restriction. He also noted, in at least one interview that ran in newspapers across the country, that his 2-year-old son was, in his words, an avid Jolt consumer. That quote ran everywhere. Within 12 months of launch, the Jolt Company had signed franchise distribution agreements in 20 states. By 1987, the company recorded $1 million in sales. The following year, sales dropped 44%, a number that would have ended most startups. But the distribution footprint kept expanding. By the end of the decade, Jolt Cola was available in 44 states and Canada. Joseph Rapp had been right. There was a market on the other side of the room. He just had not anticipated how loud the argument about it was going to get. The first thing to understand about Jolt Cola is what it was not. It was not a health drink. It was not a sports drink. It was not a vitamin supplement or a wellness product, or anything that needed a doctor's endorsement or a government seal of approval. Jolt Cola was a soda that did exactly what a soda was supposed to do in the era, before the beverage industry decided that doing less was the same as doing better. That clarity of purpose was the product. The formula itself was deceptively straightforward. Real cane sugar, not the high-fructose corn syrup that Coca-Cola had just quietly substituted into its flagship recipe, triggering the new Coke backlash of 1985. Real caffeine at the maximum concentration the FDA permitted. No artificial sweeteners. No caffeine-free positioning. No apology on the label. The flavor profile was fuller and heavier than a standard cola. The higher sugar content gave it a density that regular Coke or Pepsi no longer had, and the caffeine hit was perceptible within minutes in a way that a standard soft drink simply was not. People who drank it knew they had drunk something. That was the point. The packaging in 1986 was simple and deliberately aggressive. The original Jolt can was red and yellow, high contrast, high visibility, designed to stand out on a shelf, next to the cool blues and whites of diet sodas and the familiar curves of Coke and Pepsi. There was no lifestyle imagery on the label. No athlete. No sunset. No suggestion of leisure or refreshment. Just the name, the lightning bolt, and the slogan. The can looked like it was daring you to pick it up. Jolt was also the first carbonated soft drink in American history to sell at a premium price above Coca-Cola and Pepsi. That decision was not accidental. C.J. Rapp understood that the Jolt Company could not win a price war against the two largest beverage corporations on Earth, so he reframed the product entirely. Jolt was not competing with Coke and Pepsi on taste or refreshment. It was competing on function. You paid more because you got more, and more was quantifiable. Printed right there on the can in plain English. That positioning, a beverage sold for what it did, rather than how it tasted, had never been applied to a cola before. It was, in retrospect, the founding logic of the entire energy drink industry. The go-to-market strategy was built around the one resource the Jolt Company had in unlimited supply: controversy. C.J. Rapp could not buy a Super Bowl commercial. He could not plaster Times Square with billboards. He could not pay for the kind of saturation advertising that kept Coke and Pepsi on every television screen in America. What he could do was say things in public that made people argue. He told reporters that American consumers were tired of a parade of wimpy-tasting colas. He held up his product next to a cup of coffee and pointed out, in precise milligrams, that the beverage everyone was calling dangerous contained a fraction of the caffeine that Americans drank every morning without a second thought. He gave interviews to anyone who would take them. He responded to every critic by name. He turned the health controversy into a news cycle, and the news cycle into free advertising, and the free advertising into distribution. The result was coverage that money could not have purchased. Late Night with David Letterman. Good Morning America, CNN. Not paid segments, not sponsored content. News coverage, because a soda that the government was arguing about was a story. And C.J. Rapp understood that better than anyone in the beverage industry at the time. Within the first year, franchise distribution agreements covered 20 states. By the end of 1987, Jolt had reached 44 states and crossed into Canada. The structural advantage this created was not market share. Jolt's share of the overall cola market remained a fraction of a percent. The advantage was reach without infrastructure. The Jolt Company did not own bottling plants across the country. It did not run refrigerated truck routes from Pittsburgh to Buffalo. It moved through existing distributor networks, placing its cans wherever a regional bottler was willing to carry something that parents were complaining about in the local paper. Controversy was the distribution model, and it worked precisely because the product delivered on its promise. Jolt Cola did not need repeat customers who loved the brand. It needed repeat customers who needed what the brand provided, and who had no alternative. In 1986, in 1987, in 1988, there was no Red Bull. There was no Monster. There was no Rockstar. There was no 5-hour energy shot sold at every gas station counter in America. There was Jolt, for a specific kind of American. The student pulling an all-nighter, the programmer debugging at 3 a.m., the night shift worker halfway through a double. That was enough. It was about to become considerably more than enough. In the late 1980s, something was happening in American culture that no beverage company had fully mapped. A generation of young people had grown up watching their parents order diet everything. Diet cola, caffeine-free cola, light beer, low-fat, everything. The message from every major food and beverage company through the late 1970s and early 1980s was consistent and relentless. Restraint was sophistication. Less was more. The responsible adult chose the version with fewer consequences. That generation had a different opinion. They were born between 1960 and 1972. They had watched the diet soda wars play out on television since childhood. They had seen New Coke arrive and fail spectacularly in 1985. A billion-dollar miscalculation that told them something important about the companies selling them beverages. Those companies did not actually know what people wanted. Those companies were guessing. And sometimes they guessed catastrophically wrong. Jolt Cola was not a beverage to this demographic. It was a position. Picking up a can of Jolt in 1987 or 1988 was a small, affordable, completely legal act of refusal. Refusal of subtraction. Refusal of the idea that what you consumed should be defined by what had been taken out of it. The can said, all the sugar and twice the caffeine. And that sentence, to a certain kind of 20-year-old in a college dorm room, read less like a nutrition label and more like a manifesto. The fact that parents objected made it better. The fact that health advocates called it irresponsible made it better still. C.J. Rapp had not set out to build a countercultural icon. He had set out to build a soda that worked. But the two turned out to be the same thing, because the culture he was selling into was primed for exactly this kind of product. Something that said what it was, did what it said, and made no effort to pretend otherwise. By 1988, Jolt Cola was in 44 states. The sales numbers were modest by the standards of the major cola companies. The cultural footprint was not. Then the programmers found it. The personal computer industry in the late 1980s was not yet the polished, venture capital-saturated ecosystem it would become by the mid-1990s. It was messier than that. Smaller, more obsessive. Software developers in 1988 and 1989 were often working out of cramped offices, spare bedrooms, and university computer labs, writing code on machines that crashed regularly, debugging systems that had no documentation, building products for a market that had not yet decided what it wanted. The hours were brutal, the deadlines were arbitrary, the coffee was bad, and the vending machines closed at midnight. Jolt Cola was available at 24-hour convenience stores. The adoption was not the result of a marketing campaign. Jolt did not buy advertising in computer magazines or sponsor developer conferences. What happened was simpler and more durable than any paid campaign. Programmers drank Jolt because it worked, told other programmers, and the word spread through a community that communicated faster and more efficiently than any other professional group in America at the time. By the early 1990s, Jolt Cola had become the unofficial beverage of the American software industry. The evidence of this is specific and documented. Dr. Dobbs' Journal, the most widely read technical publication for professional software developers in the United States, ran a cover story on Jolt Cola, not an advertisement, a story. The editors of a serious technical magazine devoted to algorithms and programming languages found the cultural phenomenon of a high-caffeine soda powering their readership significant enough to put on the front page. In 1991, Software Development Magazine launched an annual award called the Jolt Award, given every year to the best computer books, development tools, and software products in the industry. The award's logo was modeled directly on the Jolt Cola logo. Jolt Cola was served at the award ceremony each year. The Jolt Award ran continuously from 1991 until Dr. Dobbs' Journal ceased publication. In 2009, the same year Jolt Cola went bankrupt. The two died together. The soda and the award it had inspired, closing out the same era at the same moment. That parallel is not a coincidence. It is a timestamp. Jolt Cola and the first generation of the American software industry grew up together. They peaked together, and they ended together, replaced by a world that had absorbed everything they built and moved on without them. Hollywood noticed before the industry did. In 1992, Wayne's World reached American theaters. The film grossed more than $100 million domestically. In one scene, Garth reaches for a Jolt Cola. 14 million people saw that in theaters. Millions more saw it on home video. For a brand with no television advertising budget, that single moment was worth more than any commercial CJ Rapp could have afforded to run. Then came 1993. Jurassic Park was the highest-grossing film of the year, earning over $900 million worldwide. In the control room of the dinosaur park, a programmer named Dennis Nedry, overworked, underpaid, morally compromised, running on caffeine and resentment, kept a stack of Jolt Cola cans on his workstation. The cans were not there because of a paid product placement deal. They were there because the filmmakers wanted Nedry's desk to look like the desk of a real programmer, and a real programmer's desk in 1993 had Jolt Cola on it. The cans were set dressing that told the truth. $900 million at the box office. Jolt Cola on the most-watched desk in American cinema that year. No advertising budget required. 2 years later, in 1995, a film called Hackers arrived in American theaters. It was not a blockbuster. It grossed $12 million against a $15 million budget and received mixed reviews from critics who found its vision of hacker culture simultaneously too dramatic and not dramatic enough. But among a specific demographic, young, technically literate, already inclined toward the kind of late-night computing that Jolt Cola was built to support, it became something closer to a document than a film. In one scene, a character holds up a can of Jolt Cola and delivers a line that no marketing department could have scripted. Jolt Cola, the soft drink of the elite hacker. That line was not ironic. It was not a joke. It was the film's shorthand for a real cultural fact that by 1995, Jolt Cola had become so thoroughly embedded in the identity of American computing culture that a Hollywood screenplay used it as character definition. You did not need to explain who these people were if you showed them drinking Jolt. The audience already knew. The pop culture appearances accumulated through the decade. Gremlins 2, The New Batch, Beavis and Butthead on MTV, a recurring fictional analog in The Simpsons, a cameo in Stranger Things set in the 1980s, decades after the fact, because the show's writers understood that Jolt on a desk was a period detail as accurate as a particular haircut or a specific model of television set. Each appearance was unpaid. Each one reinforced the same image. Jolt Cola was what certain kinds of Americans drank when they were doing something that mattered to them under pressure. That image had real commercial consequences. Through the late 1980s and into the 1990s, the Jolt Company expanded its product line systematically. In the summer of 1987, it introduced Jolt 25, a lower-calorie version sweetened with a combination of sugar and NutraSweet, carrying 25 calories per 12-ounce can. It was a careful move designed to capture the portion of the Jolt audience that wanted the caffeine without the full sugar load, without abandoning the brand's core identity. The flavor extensions followed: Cherry Bomb, Citrus Climax, Orange Blast, White Lightning, which was grape, Red Eye, Electric Blue. Each name followed the same logic as the original: direct, slightly aggressive, designed to communicate energy rather than refreshment. None of them pretended to be something they were not. In 2003, the Jolt Company licensed the brand name beyond beverages for the first time. Jolt Gum, Jolt Mints, Jolt Candy. The caffeine delivery mechanism changed. The promise remained identical. It was among the first times an American soda brand had successfully extended into non-beverage consumer products built around a functional claim rather than a flavor or a lifestyle association. International distribution had been running since the late 1980s. Canada through Cott Corporation, primarily to college campuses and the surrounding communities. Japan through UCC Weshima Coffee Company in the late 1980s and early 1990s. The Philippines through Cosmos Bottling Corporation beginning in 1995. The brand traveled because the need it addressed was not uniquely American. Students and night workers and people who needed to stay alert existed everywhere. But the culture it carried was entirely American, and that combination proved exportable. By the mid-1990s, Jolt Cola was operating in 44 states and multiple international markets. It had inspired a prestigious software industry award that bore its name. It had appeared in 3 major Hollywood productions without paying for placement in any of them. It had built a loyal customer base among programmers, students, night shift workers, farmers who preferred real sugar, and anyone who had ever looked at the wall of diet sodas in a convenience store and wanted something that went the other direction. The Jolt Company was not Coca-Cola. It was never going to be Coca-Cola. Its market share of the overall American cola market remained below 1% throughout its history, a number that sounds like failure until you understand what Jolt had actually built. It had built a category, not a brand within an existing market. A category. A new way of thinking about what a beverage could be sold to do. The idea that a drink could be marketed on function, on the specific measurable effect it produced in the person who consumed it, did not exist in the American beverage industry before Jolt Cola put it on a can in Rochester, New York in 1986. Everything that came after. Every energy drink sold in every gas station and grocery store and gymnasium in America is downstream of that idea. In 1997, an Austrian company called Red Bull launched in the United States. Red Bull was smaller than a standard soda can. It cost more than a standard soda can. It contained taurine and B vitamins and a specific combination of ingredients that its marketing described not as a soda, but as an energy drink, a term that had not existed as a commercial category before Jolt Cola made the concept viable. Red Bull's American launch generated $35 million in revenue in its first year. CJ Rapp watched it happen from Rochester. He had spent 11 years building the road. Someone else had just driven a very fast car down it. What happened next happened quickly. And it did not happen the way most people who remembered Jolt Cola assumed it did. The collapse of the Jolt Company was not a slow fade. It was not a gradual loss of shelf space or a steady erosion of market share. It was something stranger and more specific than that. It was a decision about cans. Red Bull did not defeat Jolt Cola the way Coca-Cola defeated Pepsi or the way Pepsi defeated RC Cola. Through superior distribution, deeper advertising budgets, and decades of accumulated shelf dominance, Red Bull defeated Jolt Cola by doing to Jolt exactly what Jolt had done to Coke and Pepsi in 1986. It went further. Jolt Cola had doubled the caffeine in a standard soda and called that innovation. Red Bull added taurine, B vitamins, and glucuronolactone, ingredients that had never appeared in an American beverage before, priced the product above anything in the soda aisle, packaged it in a slim 8-ounce can that looked nothing like a soda, and told consumers it was not a soda at all. It was something new, something that belonged in a different part of the store, a different part of the conversation, a different part of the culture. Red Bull launched in the United States in 1997 and generated $35 million in revenue in its first year on American shelves. Monster Energy followed in 2002. Rockstar arrived in 2001. Within 5 years of Red Bull's American debut, the energy drink category, the category that Jolt Cola had invented and then failed to define, was worth billions of dollars annually and growing faster than any other segment of the American beverage market. The customers who left Jolt for Red Bull did not leave because Jolt had changed. They left because Red Bull had given them a reason to upgrade. The programmers who had kept Jolt under their desks in 1991 were senior engineers and startup founders by 2001. Red Bull cost more. It came in a smaller can. It felt like a professional tool rather than a college dorm staple. The upgrade made sense to them, and they made it without ceremony or sentiment. Jolt Cola had built its entire identity on being the most serious caffeine option available. The moment a more serious option existed, that identity became a liability. The Jolt Company responded. It attempted to reposition the brand as an energy drink rather than a soda, renaming products under the Jolt Energy label, adjusting the formulation, adding ingredients to compete with the functional profiles that Red Bull and Monster were marketing. The repositioning was not irrational. The logic was sound, but the execution ran into a problem that no amount of rebranding could solve. Jolt Cola was a soda. Its loyal customers knew it as a soda. Its distribution infrastructure was built around the soda aisle. Its brand identity, everything that had made it visible and credible and culturally embedded, was rooted in the specific, honest, unambiguous promise of a soda that did more than other sodas. When the Jolt Company tried to become an energy drink company, it was neither the thing it had been, nor the thing it was trying to become. It occupied a middle ground that satisfied nobody. Meanwhile, the company's finances were deteriorating. Around 2005, CJ Rapp made a decision that was, in its own way, entirely consistent with everything he had ever done. He decided to commit. He decided to go further rather than retreat. He designed a new package for Jolt Cola, a resealable bottle shaped like an AA battery, cobalt blue, bold logo, visually unlike anything else on the market. The concept was direct and clever. Jolt gave you energy. Batteries gave devices energy. The package would make that connection physical and impossible to ignore. The battery bottles were a design triumph. They were also catastrophically expensive to produce. The tooling required to manufacture a resealable bottle in that specific shape, at commercial scale, from a supplier capable of meeting national distribution requirements, cost significantly more than standard beverage packaging. The margin on each unit was compressed in ways that the company's existing revenue could not comfortably absorb. But Rapp believed in the concept. Hein believed that the packaging innovation could relaunch the brand the way the original red and yellow can had launched it in 1986, through visibility, through distinctiveness, through the kind of shelf presence that made people stop and pick it up. I was not entirely wrong about the packaging. The battery bottles got attention. I was wrong about the scale. In 2008, CJ Rapp signed a contract with a packaging manufacturer named Rexam. The contract was for 90 million resealable cans, the battery-shaped containers that had become Jolt's signature packaging, 90 million units. To put that number in context, the entire American energy drink market in the mid-2000s was growing rapidly, but Jolt Cola's share of that market was a fraction of what it had been in its peak soda years. 90 million cans represented a production commitment that assumed a level of demand the company had not demonstrated and could not guarantee. Rapp signed the contract without informing his board of directors. He did not bring it to a vote. He did not present it for approval. He did not consult the investors who had acquired majority interest in the Jolt Company through a firm called Emigrant Capital. He signed it, the order went into production, and the invoice eventually arrived at a company that did not have the resources to pay it. When the board discovered what had happened, Emigrant Capital moved quickly. CJ Rapp, the founder, the formula developer, the man who had spent nearly 3 decades building the brand from a concept discussed at a soft drink distributor meeting in 1979, was removed as CEO of his own company. The investor group took operational control. It did not save the company. Without Rapp, the institutional knowledge that held the Jolt Company together evaporated faster than anyone had anticipated. The relationships with regional distributors, the understanding of which markets the brand still held loyalty in, the instinct for what the Jolt customer actually wanted. None of that transferred cleanly to a management team installed by a private equity firm whose core business had nothing to do with beverages. Shelf space contracted. Distributors who had carried Jolt for a decade began dropping the brand in favor of Red Bull and Monster, which offered better margins, stronger consumer demand, and the kind of national marketing support that Jolt could no longer provide. The convenience stores and college campus accounts that had been Jolt's foundation since 1986 quietly restocked their coolers with other products. The phones at regional distributors did not ring the way they once had. Sales fell, then fell again. On September 28, 2009, the Jolt Company, Inc. filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in the United States Bankruptcy Court in Rochester, New York. The filing cited the company's inability to meet its financial obligations to Wrexham, the packaging manufacturer, as the proximate cause of the insolvency. 90 million cans. That was the number. Not Red Bull, not Monster, not the FDA or the health advocates or the parent groups that had spent 20 years trying to get Jolt Cola off store shelves. A contract for 90 million cans that the company could not pay for ended 24 years of operation in a single court filing. CJ Rapp spent the next 8 years in litigation, suing Emigrant Capital over the circumstances of his removal and the handling of the bankruptcy. The legal proceedings moved slowly through the federal courts, while the brand he had built sat in the hands of creditors and eventually passed to a Manhattan-based entity called ECC Jolt, LLC. The Jolt Company name disappeared. Wet Planet Beverages, the corporate identity the company had operated under in its later years, was dissolved. The battery bottles stopped coming off the line. Distribution ceased in market after market, state after state. Without announcement and without ceremony, the last cans were sold. The coolers were restocked. The shelf space closed. 24 years. Gone. Jolt Cola did not stay dead. In September 2017, 8 years after the bankruptcy filing, a can of Jolt Cola appeared on the shelves of Dollar General stores across the United States. $1 per 16-ounce can. The new ownership, ECC Jolt, LLC, based in Manhattan, had struck a deal with the discount retail chain through what a company spokesperson described as a chance meeting on an airplane between Jolt and Dollar General executives. The two companies found, mid-flight, that their brands aligned. A one-year exclusive agreement followed. The nostalgia was genuine. Customers who had not seen a Jolt Cola can in nearly a decade bought them in quantity. Social media lit up briefly with photographs of the red and yellow logo sitting in Dollar General shopping baskets next to paper towels and canned soup. The price point, $1, was designed to remove every possible barrier between a former Jolt drinker and the memory of what Jolt had once been. By 2019, the cans were gone again. No announcement, no press release, no explanation. The Dollar General website stopped listing Jolt Cola as available. The brand's social media accounts went silent. The company's website reduced itself to a series of blank black screens. The second revival had lasted approximately 2 years and left no more permanent mark on the American beverage market than a footprint in wet sand. The third attempt was different in kind. In 2025, a Florida-based sports nutrition company called Redcon One acquired the Jolt Cola license through a deal facilitated by the licensing agency IMG. Aaron Singerman, Redcon One's founder, had grown up in the 1980s as a child who was not allowed to drink Jolt. He was, by his own account, exactly the kind of person the brand had always attracted. Someone who remembered Jolt not as a product but as a prohibition, which meant he remembered it as something worth wanting. Redcon One approached the revival seriously. The team scoured eBay for original Jolt Cola cans from the 1980s, buying as many as they could find. They opened them. They tasted them. They discovered, without surprise, that a cola sealed in a can in 1985 does not taste like a cola sealed in a can in 1985 anymore. The flavor scientists Redcon One hired, including one who had helped develop several of Bang Energy's best-selling formulations, worked from reformulated benchmarks rather than degraded originals. The resulting product is not Jolt Cola as it existed in 1986. It contains 200 milligrams of caffeine per 16-ounce can, nearly 3 times the original formulation. It contains 0 sugar. It contains taurine, B vitamins, and L-carnitine. It is by every functional definition an energy drink that carries the Jolt name rather than a cola that carries the Jolt legacy. That distinction matters. The 2025 version of Jolt Cola is an acknowledgement, in product form, that the thing Jolt Cola originally was cannot exist in the market Jolt Cola originally created. The soda that invented the energy drink category cannot compete in the energy drink category as a soda. To survive at all, it had to become what it inspired. The collectors understand this better than the company does. Original Jolt Cola merchandise has maintained a quiet, persistent secondary market for decades. Vintage cans from the 1986 and 1987 production runs appear regularly on eBay, drawing bids from collectors who have no intention of drinking them. The cobalt blue battery bottles from the 2005 relaunch, the packaging that ultimately destroyed the company, are now sought-after artifacts, the product of a decision so catastrophic that it circled back around to interesting. Original bottle caps from the Rochester production run sell as collectibles, sometimes displayed alongside Jurassic Park memorabilia, in recognition of the connection that set designers made in 1993 when they stacked Jolt cans on Dennis Nedry's desk. The physical site of Jolt Cola's origins in Rochester, New York, sits in a city still working through the consequences of losing the industries that defined it. Kodak filed for bankruptcy in 2012. Xerox has spent 2 decades restructuring. Rochester is not a ruin. It is a city in the long, unglamorous process of becoming something different from what it was. But the companies that made it what it was are mostly gone, and Jolt Cola is among them. And then there is the Jolt Award. From 1991 to 2009, the most prestigious recognition in the American software development industry was named after a soda. Dr. Dobbs' Journal handed it out every year to the best programming books, the best development tools, the best software of the year, and served Jolt Cola at the ceremony, and modeled the award's logo on the Jolt Cola lightning bolt. The award outlasted the soda by exactly 0 years. Dr. Dobbs' Journal ceased publication in 2009. The same year, the Jolt Company filed for bankruptcy. The programmers, who had built their careers on all-night coding sessions fueled by Jolt Cola, were, by 2009, senior enough in their industries to have juniors of their own, juniors who drank Red Bull and Monster and had never heard of Jolt. The generation that Jolt Cola fueled had grown up, and in growing up it had moved on to the things that Jolt Cola made possible. This is what Jolt Cola actually was, stripped of nostalgia and examined plainly. It was a correct idea, executed by 2 people in Rochester who understood something about human need that the entire American beverage industry had missed. It was a business that succeeded culturally far beyond what its market share numbers ever reflected. It was a category creator that lacked the scale to dominate the category it created. And it was a company undone not by a competitor or a regulator or a shift in consumer taste, but by a single unauthorized contract signed by the man who had spent 24 years keeping it alive. The American beverage industry is full of brands that were beaten by better competitors. Jolt Cola was beaten by its own ambition, the same quality that built it. That is not a cautionary tale. That is an American one. Somewhere in a convenience store cooler, a 16-ounce can with the Jolt lightning bolt on the label sits next to Red Bull and Monster, and a dozen other products that would not exist if 2 people in Rochester had not spent 6 years testing formulas that everyone else in the industry had decided were unnecessary. The customer who picks it up probably does not know that story. They know the name. They know the lightning bolt. They know in some residual way that this is the ones that started it. They reach for it. They open it. That is enough.